Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Silent Bob, and all those terrible Jay and Silent Bob type pictures, man. You're listening to Drop the Mic, the only podcast that I listen to that I'm not a part of. Every podcast I listen to, I usually talk on it, but not fucking Drop the Mic. That's where I'm like, let me hear what the boys have to say. And now, we drop the mic.
That phone call shit don't work.
We gotta get some paper together. You gotta get the fuck up out of Dodge right now, man.
Why?
Because there's a problem with the deal.
No, ain't no problem, man. Ain't no problem I can't fix. Look, we getting this money, man.
No, listen to me. You cannot take this fucking deal.
No.
Chaz, listen to me. You cannot take this deal.
Why, Tango?
Can we just take a ride, please? Kaz, please, let's just take a ride.
Yeah, man, let's take a ride. Come on.
Welcome back to our Humble San Diego podcast. We're your hosts, Wesley Swanson and Chris Pollock, and together for this outing, we are the Drop the Mic podcast. Here is episode 308, Trouble Brewing in the Boroughs, where Chris and I will be taking a look back at director Antoine Fuqua's 2009 effort, Brooklyn's Finest. But before the movie breakdown, let's get everybody warmed up out there.
And now for a special news report. Brought to you by Drop the Mic.
How are you, man?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me on, as always. I know that we kind of made I don't want to say last minute schedule change, but a last minute venue change.
Yeah.
Because we were going to do in person at the hotel, and then because of the weather this week, decided, you know what, probably best to just do it over the phone. That way we don't have to be out in the weather going back and forth if we don't need to be. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you for just making time for the show, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be a fun one tonight. So
I hope so. This is what I think is a very underrated movie. Yeah,
without a doubt. I think it's very, very underappreciated.
First of all, I want to shout out R.I.P. to Melinda Dillon. We know her from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. She's the mother in The Christmas Story. She's very good as Philip Baker Hall's wife in Magnolia. She passed away earlier this month. Want to give her a shout out. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Magnolia, two of my all-time favorite films. She's also very good in a Paul Newman movie I watched recently called Absence of Malice. So I'd suggest you check that one out or seek that one out and check it out if you can. Good movie. Sidney Pollack was the director of it. So shout out Melinda Dillon. Shout out to Raquel Welch, who also passed away recently. You know her from Fantastic Voyage and Bedazzled, the original Bedazzled. Really, really famous image of her from a movie she did called 1 Million Years BC, where she's in like the fur bikini. Any fans of The Shawshank Redemption know that poster because it's the poster that's hanging on the wall when Andy Dufresne escapes prison. It's what was covering up the hole. Also very, very funny. I know you're not a Seinfeld fan, but she had a very funny episode of Seinfeld where she played a diva actress. Check those out. She was also, I don't know if anyone knows this, her family moved to San Diego when she was very young. She attended La Jolla High School. I believe she went to San Diego State. And she was also the fairest of the fair at the Del Mar Fair back in the 60s, maybe the 50s. So because she spent time in San Diego, definitely got to shout her out.
Somewhat of a local, right?
Yeah. Yeah, enough to go to school out here, both high school and college. So, and lastly, this happened a few days ago, maybe over the weekend. Is R.I.P. to Richard Belzer, who great comedian, started out doing comedy and then made the leap into acting, and he is excellent in some movies and some TV shows. I mean, he's probably best known for like his Law and Order SVU stint, since that ran for so long. But he's also in Night Shift. He's the comic in the club in Scarface when they put the hit on Al Pacino. Mm-hmm. But what I really know him for, what I really want to push people to seek out, even though I don't think it's streaming anywhere, is Homicide: Life on the Streets, which is an excellent show from the early 90s, where he originated that character of Munch that he played in all these other crime shows over the years. And that's where he was on like Law and Order. Excellent show. I don't think it's streaming. His character, one of the best, along with Andre Braugher and Yaphet Kotto. I highly recommend the show. It's one of my all-time favorite shows. Very low rated. It's a huge cult classic show, but check that out. He also has a very funny appearance on an episode of The X-Files as John Munch.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. That's what I want to shout out. And also, I have recommended it on the last 2 episodes, I believe. But I just read today that HBO Max is canceling Southside, which another bonehead move from the guy running Warner's right now. So I want to shout out that show. I want to recommend it. Go watch it on HBO Max. Southside. It's really fucking funny. And watch it now before that dipshit decides to pull it for some fucking reason or another, like he did with a lot of other HBO shows. So I was really bummed when I saw that today, because I love that show. I thought it was fucking hilarious. I'm hoping that it doesn't get disappeared from HBO Max.
Is there potential for it to be rescued by somebody else?
I don't know, because it originally started on Comedy Central.
Oh, okay.
That first season aired on Comedy Central, and then I think HBO Max had picked it up. I don't know if it aired just before the pandemic. I don't know if it got lost in the pandemic shit. And HBO picked it up. But it originally was on Comedy Central. I don't know if it would go back to Comedy Central or Paramount Plus, since Viacom owns Comedy Central. Yeah, Southside was kind of a cult hit from what I understand. But I discovered it because it was from the same guys that did that Sherman Showcase show that I really dug.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched Southside, loved it, thought it was fucking hilarious. Highly recommend it. And like I said, I've recommended it on the last 2 episodes because I was watching it on those last 2. Or when we got around to doing those other 2 episodes, I was still watching it. And really funny show, so I would recommend checking it out. And given HBO Max's habit of canceling things or just pulling things off the service, I'd say try to watch it sooner rather than later in case it does get pulled. It's only like 28 episodes or so you can burn through it fairly quickly. That's what I got. Do you have any news
that I wanted to share? And I'm not even sure how I feel about this. I'm sure you're going to agree with me on this, but I guess Welcome to Derry, the prequel series, has officially been ordered for HBO Max and will take place in the 1960s, showcasing the events leading up to Andy Muschietti's It Part 1. Skarsgård is also set to make his return as Pennywise.
We just talked about HBO Max canceling a really funny show that probably didn't cost a whole lot to make room for a show that no one's asking for.
Yeah.
that they're just milking an IP. So that's you can probably gauge my thoughts from that.
Yeah. I just don't know if we need to. Sometimes I feel like the mystery behind certain things, entities, is what makes them scary. So doing a huge deep dive back into the origins could potentially weaken, what we have already, if that makes sense.
About 24 to 25 years ago, I was saying the exact same thing about Star Wars prequels. Saying that I don't need to know the entire origin story of Darth Vader. You're going to ruin the character. And guess what? They turned him into a whiny little brat.
That's pretty much all I had on the news bit this week. Especially since we're kind of recording a bit ahead of schedule, which I'm fine with.
Yeah, in February, it's a weird month, so we're recording 5 or 6 days before the even end of the month.
now it's time for the weekly recommendations.
The first one is, I'm guessing it's a mini-series. Sometimes the way that they label stuff makes it seem like there'll be a second season, which I don't really think that there will be. But it was a mini-series on Disney Plus called Light and Magic. It was the history of Industrial Light and Magic, the effects house.
Yes.
That handles the majority of special effects in Hollywood these days. It started out as doing the special effects for Star Wars, built from that, and because it was so successful doing the effects for Star Wars, then Lucas was doing Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then they handled the effects for that, and then over the years they've done a lot of effects, but we're in on a lot of the big cutting edge effects technology over the years in films. You know, they did the effects for The Abyss and Terminator 2, which led into like Jurassic Park. Really, really fascinating series. A lot of fun personalities in that group of, especially the original people that did the effects, and a lot of them still working today. So I highly recommend it. It was really fascinating. It made me really want to sit down and watch Star Wars and like Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi all over again, because just seeing them create those effects like with models and like matte paintings was really fascinating. So it's like a 6-part miniseries, but I was confused because it says, season 1, but they pretty much take it up into today. So I don't see why there would be a second season. It just seemed like a miniseries on the history of Industrial Light and Magic. But the series is called Light and Magic. I recommend it. It's a really fascinating look kind of behind the curtain of how a lot of those earlier effects were made. They even talk about the Poltergeist house, because they did the effects for Poltergeist, and they talked about how they made it implode at the end of the film. So check that out. And then the other one I have for you is a series on Apple called Blackbird with Taron Egerton and Paul Walter Hauser, where Egerton is a drug trafficker that gets sent to prison. And in order to try to get a lighter sentence, he agrees to go in to another prison, kind of as undercover, to get close to this guy who claims to have killed all these girls, but he was a serial confessor, so they didn't know if he was for real or not. And he was going to get released on appeal, but they knew that this guy probably for real is a serial killer. We can't have him out. So the deal they make with Egerton's character, it's a true story, is he goes in and finds out whether or not this guy is for real. And if so, report on what he finds out. But it was very, very good. It was from Dennis Lehane, who I'm a big fan of. You know him as a writer, a novelist. Wrote Gone Baby Gone and Mystic River, Shutter Island, the books that all those films are based on. Was a writer for The Wire, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the context of this movie. So it's from him. It's based on a true story. Very good performances from Egerton, and especially Paul Walter Hauser, who is really chilling as the serial killer. And that dude's a good actor that I've only seen in movies for like the last 4 or 5 years or so, and is always turning in an excellent performance. No disrespect to Allison Janney, who's great and I love her, but his performance as Jeff Galooly in I, Tonya is my second favorite performance in that film. He's really fucking funny in that movie. And he was in Richard Jewell a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. Jesus. But you know him in that. He's in Black Klansman. He's in The Five Bloods, the 2 Spike Lee movies, the last 2 Spike Lee films. And he's got a really funny sketch in season 2 of I Think You Should Leave. So check him out. He's excellent in Blackbird. Watch that miniseries. That's on Apple.
Very nice. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's again, it's only 6 episodes, so you can get through it fairly quickly.
I wanted to keep with the theme of Antoine Fuqua for this one, so I wanted to give a shout out to 2014's The Equalizer as a pairing for the show's movie focus of the week.
I'm a big fan of The Equalizer.
It's fucking rad, man. Anybody out there listening to this, you can stream it now on the on Stars. It's currently on Stars with the sequel, but the sequel isn't half as good as this first one. So check out the first one.
100% agree on that one. It's okay, but it's just kind of a standard action movie.
Yeah,
it's not nearly as great as the first one is. Although the second one does have Susie's boy in it.
That's right.
It's got some great action scenes in it, but especially that first one where he takes on the Russian mob guys in the room.
Yes.
When he kind of clocks them and, kind of says that he'll probably like go through the room in 14, 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
That action scene's really fucking awesome.
He's like, all of this over $9,800.
Good pick, man. Equalizer is a good flick.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now for the movie focus of the week.
So, director Antoine Fuqua was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on May 30th, 1965. Fuqua started his early career directing music videos for popular artists such as Prince, Tony Braxton, and Stevie Wonder before making his first feature-length alongside John Woo in 1998's The Replacement Killers, starring Chow Yun-fat and Mira Sorvino, followed by 2000's Bait starring Jamie Foxx, with The Replacement Killers breaking even and Bait only pulling in $15 million against its $51 million budget. The director wouldn't find success until 2001's Training Day, which proved to be hugely profitable and earned its co-star Denzel Washington an Academy Award for Best Actor. Tears of the Sun, King Arthur, and Shooter would follow, and in 2009, he would release what might be his best work alongside Training Day with Brooklyn's Finest. I'm not sure if that's a hot take, but...
No, it's his second best movie, right behind Training Day. I 100% agree with that one, too.
All right. So...
That's why we're doing it.
I figured. So Brooklyn's Finest, it's rated R. It's from 2009. It's a crime drama. It runs at 2 hours and 12 minutes, and it's got a disappointing 44 on Rotten.
Ouch.
Written by Michael C. Martin, directed by, of course, Antoine Fuqua, starring Richard Gere as Eddie, Don Cheadle as Tango, Ethan Hawke as Sal, Wesley Snipes as Kaz, Will Patton as Bill, Michael Kenneth Williams as Red, R.I.P., Shannon Kane as Chantel, Logan Marshall Green as Melvin, and Vincent D'Onofrio as Carlo. The film uses New York City as its backdrop, telling 3 vastly different character perspectives who are affected by rampant organized drug operations. The movie production took place in 3 boroughs in New York City, including Queens, Manhattan, and Brooklyn. The film screenwriter Michael C. Martin was a film student who wrote the script in 2005 for a screenwriters contest, which he came in second place for, and his screenplay continued to gain attention. An executive producer on Training Day eventually landed the project, and Antoine Fuqua signed on to direct. The movie's cast followed shortly after, taking significant pay cuts to star, with the film's budget being a modest $17 million. Brooklyn's Finest first debuted in January of 2009, but when its distributor was unable to finance the film's release, it was passed on to Overture Pictures and released to the public on March 5th, 2010. The film grossed $36.4 million at the box office and did very well for itself on the home video market. Overall, the film does a very good job with its morally compromised police enforcement narrative, and all of our leads here give dynamic, authentic, and grimy performances that helps the film's 2-hour runtime feel brief and earned. Don Cheadle in particular steals the show as an undercover who is slowly losing himself to his fabricated life. Upon its release, the movie was met with mixed reviews, which is a real shame because it shares familiar parallels with HBO's The Wire, which is regarded by many as some of the best television ever to be made. You can watch Brooklyn's Finest now via Cinemax. 3.5 tangos out of 5. Thank you.
Well, I told you we would talk about The Wire on this episode.
Yes.
Because there are no less than 3 Wire cast members in this film. 3 main Wire cast members in this film. And also, I'm one of those people who think that The Wire is one of the best shows ever. We had a discussion prior to air about The Sopranos and how I felt that The Sopranos, for the most part, is very overrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not nearly as good as The Wire. But The Sopranos is what got all the attention and all the love. And The Wire was kind of not really seen as being significant until later. And even now, there's probably people that would say that The Wire isn't as good as The Sopranos, but those people are wrong. But that's a good write-up, dude. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Brooklyn's Finest is Fuqua's second best movie, and his third is The Equalizer. But it's a shame. I didn't know that it had a strong opening, but just never really made a whole lot of money, unfortunately.
It's really weird because this is the craziest ensemble cast.
Yeah, it's like your 3 leads are heavy hitters and doing fantastic work. And even Snipes, who I think is a lead on the poster, but he's not in it that much. Because it was his first theatrical movie in like 5 or 6 years. Because Blade Trinity is the last movie that he makes that's a theatrical release. Everything else is like straight to video in the in-between years.
And Trinity came out when, 2004?
Christmas of 2004.
Okay.
So for 5+ years, he's doing, straight to video work. Or the movies that he's making aren't getting theatrically released. I think there was one that was supposed to be and then had some financial issues and ended up being dumped like on straight to DVD. But I wouldn't call him a lead in this movie because he's not nearly in it as much as the other 3. But he is on the poster, so he's kind of the 4th lead. He's kind of the nominal lead.
I would say so. He's a pivotal character. Everything hinges... Well, Tango Don Cheadle's character, everything that happens to him is kind of because of Kaz, because of Wesley Snipes' character.
Yeah. So
at least in that section of the movie, he is a pivotal person in the plot.
Yeah, absolutely. And this being kind of a not really an anthology film, but each character has their own separate story, and they have no real interaction with one another.
No, they're just in each other's kind of orbit.
Yeah. There's Hawk has like a brief conversation with Gear, but it's like they don't really know each other. They just happen to work in the same precinct.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that. And then when Gear and his partner are walking into like a convenience store, they bump into Tango, who's coming out. But that's really the only time that they're on screen together, unless you count the climax of the film where you kind of see each story kind of intersect with one another in that intersection as they like pass each other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they have no major scenes with any of the other characters. It's only Wesley Snipes and Don Cheadle are the only 2 characters that actually have interaction in history. But man, everyone, those 4 are great, but especially the three main stories. I don't know who's better, if it's Cheadle or Hawk, because they're both like really on the edge the entire time.
Hawk as Sal, he is in danger, but I feel like Cheadle's Tango is very much like losing himself and is feeling the pressure of being having his position compromised the entire time, which brings this like deeper element of danger, where
he has the most to lose in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Hawk is for the most part in a predicament of his own making.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, trying to get the new house, but every decision he makes in order to try to justify getting the money for the house is a bad decision that ultimately leads to his demise. Spoiler alert. But I'm sure that we'll get into that. But yeah, Cheeto's the one with the most to lose. But man, Hawk is just so strung out the entire movie. He looks like hell.
Unhinged, sweating bullets the entire time.
Yeah. Like just angry all the time. But you were talking about Cheeto kind of losing himself, and it's definitely evident in the beginning when he meets with Bill,
mm-hmm.
you know, his handler in the diner, and he talks about how they got pulled over, and you know his crew that he was with were just ready to kill the cops so that they wouldn't get caught because they had all the drugs in the trunk. And when they pull back into the Brooklyn projects that they're going to, they find out that there was a kid that was killed because a cop killed him by trying to rob him. And when Cheeto finds that out and he's talking to Bill, he says, you know, who cares? Like, we could have killed those two guys and, you know, it would have been 2-1, but fuck it. Like, you know, it doesn't matter because these guys were out here like killing innocent people.
He kind of tells him, like, you see what I'm saying here? Like, I'm fucked up in the game. You got to get me out.
Yeah. He's been in too deep for too long, and he's kind of losing who he is. That might be my favorite scene of his in the film. And that's, you know, one of his earliest scenes, but just the intensity to which he tells that story.
Yeah.
And you can see like what he's feeling in that moment. But he's doing it all, you know, in order to make detective. But then he wants to get out of this because he just wants, hey, I want like the quiet desk job. You know, I want out of this. And you kind of get the feeling that he's being strung along a little.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even Bill, who's supposed to be his friend, is like, yeah, I know these things take time. And, you know, I'm working on it. But you kind of get that feeling that he's not working as hard as he should.
And then they throw in the kind of this like monkey wrench into the plan where they're like, all right, like we'll give you your position if you agree to basically set up your friend Kaz, and this becomes a dilemma for Tango because Kaz saved his life while they were in prison, correct?
Yeah, and you don't get the backstory as to what Tango was doing undercover in prison.
Yeah.
But yes, he was apparently shanked in prison, and Kaz is the one who saved him. And yeah, and then Ellen Barkin's FBI agent Smith shows up and is like, yeah, this guy got released. He's a bad dude. We want to put him away. You're going to front this deal with our undercover agents. You're going to front this deal to Kaz, make him take it so that we can put him away. And yeah, he's really conflicted because even though they're on opposite sides of the law, you can tell, like, Kaz is his friend. Kaz saved his life. He has genuine affection for him. He doesn't want to do it, but when he leaves the diner in anger after the meeting with Barkin, you know, Bill chases him down and says, hey, if you do this, you'll make detective first grade, which is what Tango really wants. You know, but at what cost is he going to make detective?
Tango kind of reluctantly accepts the assignment and starts, you know, to set up Kaz. He sets up the deal and everything's going good. And then he kind of has a change of heart and basically tells Bill, like, you know, take me off the case. Like, I'm done. I can't do this. And then he's like, well, they already predicted that you were going to do this. So they're going to take Kaz down without you. So just stay away. Like, there's nothing you could do. It's a done deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Tango goes out to find Kaz and tell him, like, you cannot go through with this deal. Even though beforehand he had this kind of heartfelt conversation with Kaz saying, like, do the deal and then take the cash and vanish and be a ghost, like just disappear and no one will be able to find you.
Yeah, and even early on when they meet up for the first time because Kaz got released from prison, they have that conversation outside where Kaz goes way back with some of those other guys with Red, Michael K. Williams' character, and he says, none of those guys came to see me. None of those guys, sent me anything, did anything for me. It was only you. It was only Tango that did anything for him. So they have that bond.
Mm-hmm. But, so Tango goes to find Kaz and tell him, you gotta forget about this job. Don't do it. But he can't tell him in so many words. He says, come and just take a ride with me and let me explain. And in that same moment, there's a drive-by where Kaz is gunned down. And so Tango never has the opportunity to tell him what was really going on.
Yeah, and the thing with he was going to have to tell him what was really going on and that he was a cop, and that was probably going to ruin their friendship and their bond, but it was going to save Kaz's life. He didn't know at the time that he was going to be gunned down, but it was going to save him from going to prison, from getting caught and going to prison and, possibly losing his life as he ends up doing in the drive-by. Red was going around Kaz going to try to take the deal for himself.
Okay.
And, because they can't have Kaz in the way, he, set him up, and that's what the drive-by was all about. But because the feds were watching Kaz, you see them speed away after he's shot too. And that's why Tango is so upset. Not only was his friend killed, but he knew that the feds were watching him too.
Mm-hmm.
And basically just did nothing to stop what was happening. That anger and at what happened in losing his friend is, what causes Tango to kind of completely lose himself and go to seek revenge on the people responsible for his friend's death.
Basically, the FBI or whoever, they're like, oh, we don't care about Red. That's just some small time shit. We have bigger fish to fry. So then that pisses Tango off, where he's like, oh, so Red just gets a fucking pass,
Yeah.
For killing someone, and then he just goes on this kind of revenge, revenge cycle of his own, where he just basically goes after Red and whoever was involved in the Kaz murder.
Unfortunately, that leads to his death as well.
Yes.
In a really random, unfortunate set of circumstances that's tied into Ethan Hawke's demise. People in the wrong place at the wrong time, unfortunately. Tango shoots Red coming out of the elevator, shoots the other guy, shoots K-Rock, and then the other dude, Beamer, is like, look, I have no beef with you, man. He takes out his gun and then loads it and puts it on the ground. And so Tango forgets about him and goes after Red. And when he gets him in the street, Red is trying to plead for his life and say, hey, look, I didn't mean to, I wasn't aiming for you. I wasn't trying to kill you. I was just going to take out Kaz because, he's changed. He's soft. He's not who he used to be.
He says something like Kaz had turned into, he was as soft as baby shit or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Great scene.
And then he's like, hey, look, I don't really care about all that. I'm a cop.
He said, you ain't no cop, B.
Yeah, he's in denial. He said, yeah, I am, and he shows him the badge.
He said, go ahead and arrest me, Officer Tango.
Which he does not. He unloads his clip into him, and then as he's reloading, which is a really good sequence where the sound drops out and all you hear is the L train above him, but he gets shot from behind. It just blows a big ass hole through his chest.
And he's okay, and he starts to turn around and he points his weapon at the cop, and then they shoot another round into him.
Yeah, Ronnie shoots him again, and then realizes that he's a cop, an undercover cop. But there's a really great scene on the roof that you and I need to get into, where one of the houses gets raided, or one of the the stash houses gets raided. One of the stash apartments gets raided by Ethan Hawke and his crew of cops. And the kid that gets caught by them downstairs that takes them to the room, they have him up on the roof later on in the movie. You know, they're calling him a snitch and a rat and everything, and they're going to toss him off the roof. And that's when Kaz and Tango come up, you know, wondering like what's going on. And there's a great line where Kaz says, you know, Red, what's going on? And K-Rock starts talking, and he's like, wait. He's like, who are you? He's like, oh, yeah. And he's like, oh, so you're not Red. Because he's talking to Red, and all of a sudden this guy's popping off on the mouth. And they're ready to throw him off the roof. And Tango's trying to talk them out of it. And that's where, you know, Red thinks that something is up with Tango.
Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't, I guess he said, you're always pulling your weapon, but you never use it.
Yeah, you don't do any work.
Of course, Tango takes that moment. He's got to size him up. So he sizes up Red, pulls out his Glock, and he's like, "Oh, you want me to bust? You want me to put like some work in right now?" He's all, "Just say something, say some shit." And then he's like, I think Kaz basically tells him to back down, like calm down, and he's like, "Man, I want to kill you so bad right now." Fucking Don Cheadle.
So you had a theory on that before we went on there. You were telling me what the theory was. So why don't you let your listeners know what your theory is? All
right. So for people who are familiar with New Jack City, they do. I think Nino Brown and a couple of his goons in New Jack City, they're gonna. They might actually throw somebody off like a bridge or something.
That's the opening of the movies. They dump the guy off the bridge.
Yeah, so I felt
that's the "see you wouldn't want to be you" line.
Exactly.
That's at the very beginning of the film.
And Wesley Snipes being on top of that roof, it kind of mirrors New Jack City. And then when Don Cheadle drops that line, it's very reminiscent of a little piece of dialogue from Ice-T at the end of New Jack City when he's he wants to kill this dude and he goes, "I want to kill you so bad right now, my dick is hard." And I don't know, that whole scene for me, it's kind of like a homage to New Jack City. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just what I pick up from all of that.
Well, you didn't mention this in the opening, I believe, and if you did, then stop me right here. But Michael C. Martin, who wrote this film, had an agent that was shopping this script around. Mm-hmm. This was his first script that he wrote. And even though this hadn't generated much interest, they liked his writing, and they were trying to hire him to write a New Jack City sequel.
Yes.
So maybe there is some truth to your theory that's a nice homage, seeing as how Wesley Snipes is Nino Brown in New Jack City. It's the roof scene is it mirrors that opening on the bridge. And also, Michael Martin was being hired to write a New Jack City sequel.
Judging by the writing in this movie, I could see why people would want him for that project. But do you really, just off of like your merit alone, do you think that a New Jack City sequel could work?
No. Movie making being a business, I think New Jack City was a surprise hit. Mm-hmm. And Warner Brothers was just looking to kind of capitalize on that. Now, nothing ever happened. New Jack City came out in 91, so between the years that this movie was made, that's like a 17-year gap, 18-year gap. So I don't know if a New Jack City sequel would have worked that long after the original.
It would it could be kind of like what happened with Sin City, where they just kind of took too long.
Yeah.
And then the sequel just like was meddling.
Yeah, the bloom is off the rose by that point.
And also some movies are a product of their time. Like New Jack City worked because of when it came out, you know?
Yeah, and then because of what New York was at the time that it came out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was pre-New York being really cleaned up. That was the height of the crack epidemic. That's why that movie works. Seeing a movie however many years later, there would be no grounds for it, in my opinion. So, but this was Michael Martin's first screenplay that he wrote. He submitted it. It was like for a screenwriting contest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And he didn't win, but he got a subscription to the Independent Feature Project, which I believe is now the Gotham Film and Media Institution. And through them, like, this screenplay started to generate interest. And he submitted this as a writing sample for like the New Jack City sequel script. That's how this script had come to the attention of the people that ended up making it.
Yeah, basically his agent that was hired to get him the New Jack City job, like, was responsible for getting Brooklyn's Finest sold, the script itself, correct?
Yeah, and I believe the person who ran the production company, Thunder Road, actually had worked on Training Day, was an executive with Warner Brothers at the time of Training Day. So he'd had a relationship with Antoine Fuqua, and that's how this script found its way to Fuqua. So that was kind of an interesting road that this script took to being made.
What an incredible first outing to write this.
Yeah.
For your first piece. It's pretty fucking good, right?
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, I don't think he really lived up to much anything past that. He did more writing for television than anything else.
Okay.
Hell on Wheels, which was a Western show for AMC.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Shades of Blue, which was a cop show on NBC. Lethal Weapon series. So he had done a lot of writing for TV. Empire, but nothing really feature related. So I see one, Vatican Tapes.
Oh, is that with Michael Pena, I think?
That's an exorcism movie. Yeah, with Michael Pena. So he wrote that. But yeah, it's too bad he didn't really live up to the promise of this film, or the screenplay for this film. But hey, we talked about this before a couple years ago with the guy that wrote Inside Man, and then the other movie that he wrote is Righteous Kill, and it's like night and day, the quality between those two films.
Yeah, it's like they crumble beneath there's too much pressure there. You set the bar too high.
Yeah. So that's Tango's plot line. Let's talk about Hawk, man.
Oh yes. Sal. Very, very unhinged in this.
Yeah, as we said earlier, he's like he's the one who's visibly on edge the entire time. You don't see it in Cheeto because he acts cool. It comes across in his dialogue with Bill. But Sal is definitely completely unhinged the entire film. And he just like to open the movie with him in that conversation with D'Onofrio, which when I was rewatching this, I was like, dude, the two of them have popped up in a lot of movies together. They're both in the Magnificent Seven remake that Fuqua does, like 6 or 7 years after this. They're both in. I don't think they share the screen because it's kind of a Zoom call, or was like a FaceTime call in Sinister. So I was wondering if those two are friends, like for real, or they just happen to like pop up in the same shit.
It's hard to gauge. But their conversation, the way that, going back to what you said, the way this movie opens, it's kind of like a cameo by Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yeah.
Because he gets fucking viciously murdered, kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, he's telling this story about, you could do something that you think is right, but it's for the wrong reasons, or you could do something wrong, but it's for the right reasons. And that kind of sets up Hawk's plotline.
Yeah, it mirrors like his whole motive for the entire movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And kind of all three of their plot lines, actually, but Hawk's especially. because he's trying to get the money to get a new house, a bigger house, because he has a large family. He's expecting more
Twins.
because his wife is pregnant with twins, but also she's ill because of the shitty conditions of the wood that's in the house. They make multiple references to the mold in the walls, and that his wife has asthma and she's feeling worse. There's a scene at the hospital where she had to be taken in because it got so bad. So he's trying to get a better life for his family, a bigger house and a better life for his family. But the only way he can do that is by stealing money. And he doesn't see anything wrong with what he's doing because he's stealing it from criminals, from drug dealers, from whomever D'Onofrio's character was into. So he's trying to do something. He's doing something wrong, but he's doing it for the right reasons. So he thinks.
There's that scene where he's in the church, and he's trying to.
Yeah, and he doesn't care about the forgiveness. He wants the help. Whatever he's doing isn't enough. He needs a break. So he thinks.
And then every time they do a raid, you can just tell that he has other motivation. Like he's just after the money, but then there's all of these witnesses around him where he doesn't know when's the correct time, because of the D'Onofrio's character. I guess the money that he took off of him, he thought he was going to have more, but it wasn't enough. So he's like hyped up his family for this new house, and he still doesn't have the means to get the down payment or whatever for the new place. So then that becomes his dilemma, where he feels like a failure, and he starts not thinking very clearly.
No, he's completely lost. When they raid the apartment that first time that we made mention to of the kid in Tango's story, he sees someone running after they raid the apartment, and he assumes that the person running with the backpack, that's the money that got tossed out the window.
Yeah.
So he immediately leaves the scene, kind of to the surprise of his fellow officers, so he can chase down this one guy. And when he chases him down and gets him on the ground, he's hitting him, he takes off the bag, and he realizes it's not the money, it's just some kid with a backpack.
He has like diapers and formula.
Yeah, diapers, right? Taking stuff for his child, presumably. And he's like, even when he gets him down, he calls on the radio. He says, "Oh yeah, the suspect got away," when he still got him because he wants the money. He's going to let the guy go. He just wants the money that he thinks he has. But then, when he turns out that he doesn't have the money, just the reaction that he has as he lets the guy go and he's running up the stairs behind him. His eyes are just completely wide and he's like seething.
He's all, "Get the fuck out of here. Why are you running from me? If you don't have any fucking money, I could have shot you in the back." When they raid that house, when we get to see in the room before they break in the door, and the guy puts, there's a false plate in the AC center console, and that's where he puts the bag. I think supposedly that's where the money is, but then he puts it back, and then when they break in, he thinks that he tossed it out the window, but it's really sitting in there.
Yeah, it's sitting in there. He thinks the guy threw it out the window, and that's the person that he sees running. He assumes is the guy who had the money.
Mm-hmm.
That the guy had tossed out the window. The guy, by the way, Beamer, who is, you see him in that scene briefly because he's in the apartment, but he's the one of the henchmen in Tango's story is Hassan Johnson, who is from The Wire. He plays Weebay on The Wire. So both him and Michael K. Williams were on The Wire together. And there's another one that will come up a little bit later in our discussion. Another Wire cast member. Which I often wonder, was that just because these are all actors based in the New York area? Or was Fuqua a big fan of The Wire, and that's why these people got cast in these roles? I
would like to think that that's why. That it was intentional, because they all just reek of authenticity,
Yeah, that would be my motivation for putting people in the movie. I'm a huge fan of this show, or I'm a huge fan of this movie, so I want you people in this. But when they go to raid the next house, or like they go in through it's like a convenience store. It's like downstairs from a convenience store.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it turns into kind of a bloodbath. A lot of guys get killed. And there's the guy that gets shot through like the door. He's in the bathroom, and Hawk stumbles across him, and you can see him like asking the guy something. You don't hear, but he's asking the guy like where the money is, and the guy's kind of, just by his look and his body language, basically tells him "fuck you" as he's dying. And then Hawk shoots him anyways, and then finds the table full of money, starts looking at it with big wide eyes, goes to pick it up, and then his partner Ronnie comes in, is like, "What are you doing?" And then Sal immediately turns and shoots, and for that split second you think he's shooting Ronnie so that he won't see him taking the money, but there's actually a guy in the closet like right behind Ronnie that Sal shoots. But you know that if Ronnie hadn't have come across him, Sal would have taken as much as he could fit without anyone seeing. And then there's this whole part of his plot line where they're trying to buy the house, and he knows someone that has a house that she wants to sell that apparently he did a favor for and got rid of traffic tickets or summons or something, because he's on the phone with her outside of his house later on, and he's saying, "Thank you for keeping the house off the market. That way, the price doesn't go up. And I'll have the money for you by this date. Don't worry about it." So he's trying to get whatever amount he's looking for is so he could put a down payment or buy off the house, or buy the house outright. That's what he's trying to get there. And then in the end, the deadline comes and he doesn't have the money. And then that's what sets him up for his final act. And I guess they were going to raid an apartment, and then that raid got called off, but he decides to go anyways and ends up in the building, busts through the door, shoots all these guys, and then finds the stash of money. He's not even thinking rationally anymore, because he shoots the guy with what I'm assuming is his service weapon. He shoots all those guys. He's not wearing any gloves. He's touching everything in the house looking for the money. So he's so desperate that there's no rational thought to anything he's doing anymore. Arguably, not that there ever was, but by the point where he reaches his climax, he's not paying attention to anything. And that's what leads to him getting killed, is he's not paying attention to the lookout kid who's out front of the building, who knows that he's out of place going into that building.
They lock eyes, so he knows that he's there, but he just kind of dismisses the kid.
Well, the other thing is, he's got his weapon out before he even walks through the doors.
Yeah, so he looks real sketchy.
Yeah, but he goes into the house, I'm assuming the door is still wide open, because he went in, and then the kid ends up getting up there and shooting him in the back a few times as he's, collecting as much money as he can.
That's when Ronnie kind of catches up to him. He's outside of the building, and that's when Ronnie crosses paths with Tango.
Yeah.
And he kind of inadvertently kills Tango. And then, I think radios in or tells somebody to call 911 and that they have an officer down in reference to Tango, and then he goes after to find Sal, hoping that Sal is okay, which he is not at this point.
No, and he just leaves Tango. He just yells for someone to call 911, and he
Yeah.
just immediately runs after Sal, which I guess is a tough situation to be in, but it's like, man, you just killed an undercover cop. Like, that's a big enough deal that I would probably stay there and try to radio that in. But he's trying to save his friend, so he ends up chasing after him that way.
He sees the lookout kid run off.
Yeah.
Then he gets up into the apartment where Sal is, and I think by that time Sal's already deceased, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't looking too good for him, because as soon as he got shot in the back, you can see all the blood start coming out of his mouth.
Yeah. He gets shot 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. He's like smoking the cigarette, and he takes the cigarette out of his mouth, and all of a sudden all its blood starts coming out. So got shot through the lung. But Hawk is great in the movie, but I think Hawk's been great in all three of the movies that he's done with Fuqua.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, he had an Oscar nomination for Training Day.
He did for best supporting actor.
And he's amazing in that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's very good here, and I think he's fantastic in The Magnificent Seven as well. He's one of my favorite roles in that movie. It's a good movie. It's not nearly as good as the original Magnificent Seven.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked it. I liked it a lot. I remember taking my dad to watch it, and the both of us really enjoying it. It's got a pretty solid cast. He's directed a few pilots for TV and streaming. I know, in addition to doing the film, so he's been pretty fucking busy. He's got The Equalizer coming up this year. Unfortunately, I can't say I'm super wild about what he's got coming up after that. Let's bring it back to Brooklyn's Finest, because we still have one more character to talk about,
which is Richard Gere.
Which I'm not a big fan of Richard Gere because he just doesn't make interesting movies to me. I was looking at his IMDb and I'm like, there's very few movies in there that I really enjoyed because I'm like kind of just bored.
The two big ones that I think of Richard Gere for, that's not Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman's pretty good.
It's good. But outside of that.
Yeah.
Unfaithful.
Unfaithful is a good movie, and he's good. He's very good in it.
With Diane Lane.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
And The Jackal, also with Bruce Willis.
And I think The Jackal is good. My beef with The Jackal is I just wish that Richard Gere's character wasn't an Irish IRA guy.
Because he sucks at the accent?
He's not great with that. It was like, oh, just make him an American sharpshooter or hire an Irish guy to play the Irish character. That's my only beef with it, but I do like The Jackal. That's
another one that has a severely low rating on Rotten. I think it has 35, maybe.
It's a remake. It's not nearly as good as the original or as tight as the original.
Okay.
But I liked it a lot, and I think that besides the accent, I think Gere is pretty good in it. I mean, it's got Sidney Poitier, who is awesome.
Yep.
Bruce Willis obviously is good in it.
A rare turn for him as a villain, right?
As a villain, yeah. And so I do enjoy that movie. And had just watched it again within the last couple of years. Really, really liked it. But yeah, I'm with you there. Unfaithful is good. The Jackal is good. I do like Pretty Woman. I think he's pretty good in it. There's a few earlier performances of his that are very good. Like Officer and a Gentleman is a good movie, and American Gigolo is really good. But everything kind of in between, I'm just like, I'm bored, man. You're not winning me over here with at least your choice of material. But I remember watching this movie and talking to a friend of mine afterwards and being like, dude, Richard Gere is so fucking good in this. Why doesn't he make more movies like this? Why doesn't he jump into like, some harder edge stuff?
And also what made him want to, judging on his filmography, why did he choose to take on this role? Because it's so kind of...
It's against type.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Did he decide he doesn't want to play these type of characters, or is it just people aren't really thinking of him for these types of characters? But he's like so good in this movie. It was kind of a bummer to really not see him do anything else like this. I mean, even looking at that filmography, even like The Jackal's kind of an outlier. But he's Eddie Dugan. He's a cop who's just over it. Is that how you would say that? How you would describe him?
Yeah, or kind of just past his prime as far as his career, where he just stopped giving a shit.
Yeah, he's completely checked out, and just wants to make it to the end of his tenure as a police officer and just bail. Has no desire to do anything to rock the boat. When they want to pair him up with a younger rookie cop. He just doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be a teacher or a role model. He just wants to finish out his day, keep his head down, and retire. So he just doesn't give a shit throughout the job.
When we start the movie, he's got, I think he says like 7 days before retirement, correct?
Yeah, the span of this, the time span of this film is only about a week, because you see him, crossing the calendar off. He's got, a week before retirement, and I think the film ends on the day that he retires. But you can see him just kind of resisting getting close to anyone, doing any real work. When our homeboy Logan Marshall Green is his partner.
That's right. A very early kind of semi-cameo by the American Tom Hardy.
Or in some circles, discount Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
Seriously though, Quarry's a good show. I wish Cinemax hadn't canceled it. It was awesome.
Yeah, that was a dumb decision, because I fucking loved that show.
Yeah. Really good, where he was a hitman. He's so eager to be a police officer, and he's trying to convey that eagerness to Eddie, and Eddie's just, what'd you say your name was? How he just doesn't really care. And when he tries to break up that fight outside of the store that Eddie went into really quick, Eddie breaks it up and pulls him back and says, first of all, you can't make an arrest outside of our precinct, but also, leave it alone. It doesn't really concern you, so just leave it alone. And Logan Marshall Green's like, what if later on the news, I see that she's murdered? And he has that quip comeback where he says, oh, I don't watch the news, it's too depressing. And he's like, today it's a woman getting beat, tomorrow it's a rape, next it's a murder. He's like, you can't think of all that. This job takes enough out of you each day. You have 20 years of these days, so just leave all that shit here, go home, and, make it to your retirement. Which, unfortunately, we find out a little bit later that he gets killed. Logan Marshall Green's character gets killed. That's the one interaction that Gear has with Hawk, is when they see his picture up on the board, and you find out that his rookie cop character got killed.
I was going to say, because they zoom in, and I freeze framed it on the reward money. I think it's like 10 grand.
Yeah.
For any information on his murder, which means that they don't know who did it. So I was just trying to piece it together, like what could have happened. And it seemed, as you said before, that Logan Marshall Green's character seemed very, he's obviously a rookie. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to he thinks he's going to take on the world or whatever.
Yeah.
And it seems like he got into some kind of altercation and was killed, and then they ran off. But I was just interested in that, because the way that they unfold that storytelling is very kind of vague. So I was just curious on what actually happened to.
Yeah, you never find out the real details. Just the captain says, the rookie got killed in Bed-Stuy. But the second guy that Eddie gets teamed up with is another eager guy, and is kind of in over his head when they get to the altercation in the convenience store, or in the bodega. And as Eddie decides, I'm going to go outside, and run the kid's name, he can tell that this guy's not ready for handling this situation. I'm going to have him go outside, and I'm going to stay. And when his partner insists, hey, don't embarrass me, I got this, I can handle it, Eddie knows that he shouldn't leave, but he does anyways. And unfortunately, after he leaves, the altercation gets worse, and the rookie gets way overzealous with the situation, ends up pulling his gun, and ends up, assaulting the kid and blowing his eardrum out, because he's pinning him down with, the gun held to his head. And you don't see it, but you hear the shot, and then later on you find out that the kid is deaf, at least in that ear, as a result of, the gun going off right next to him. There's this inquiry into what happened And we didn't talk about in Tango's section, but when he sits down at the restaurant with Bill the first time, and they're talking about the kid that got killed, there's this, he doesn't outright say it, but there's this implication that, hey, this cop shot this kid, but maybe the kid was up to something. You know, can you find out about that? There's this implication, and then they outright say it during the inquiry with Gear and the internal affairs officers, which I'm assuming were internal affairs, that this kid had, you know, what they say, an ounce of marijuana.
Yes.
Some small amount of marijuana, and $400. Maybe the rookie was a little overzealous and using too much force to apprehend a known drug suspect. You know, trying to juke that story and turn it into something that it wasn't. And they want Eddie to say that, and he refuses. And this is the third Wire cameo is Isaiah Whitlock as the guy that gets up and walks over to him, you know, turns off the recorder. Isaiah Whitlock, who was State Senator Clay Davis in The Wire, where he says it in pretty much every Spike Lee movie he's in, where he has the shit. That was from The Wire. So he's the third Wire guy in the film. But he gets up and walks over to Eddie and tells him, you know, this is what we need from you. And Gear's really good, man. He just kind of stares at him and is like, fuck you. He's not going to lie about it. He's not going to change the story into something it wasn't. He outright says, you know, the kid shouldn't have been there. The rookie shouldn't have been there. He wasn't ready to be on the streets. He shouldn't have been there. But he's good. They ask him in the beginning, you know, don't you want to do something useful, like with your last week on the job? And he's like, not really. It's
like so underwhelming, the experience of when he's discharged. He's just like, that's it?
Yeah. Yeah, he just turns in his equipment, and they take his badge and toss it into the pile with all the others. Yeah, and that's it.
And then the guy that's like helping him out is just like, yeah, that's it. Thank you. And then he looks at him and he's like, I gotta go take a piss or something.
Yeah.
He's kind of infatuated with this escort or prostitute.
Yeah, he has a relationship with the prostitute, and just judging by how they act with one another, she's a lot closer with him than she should be to, like, you know, her regular clientele.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like they have more of a relationship, and Gear and Eddie definitely thinks that he has more of a relationship with her.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, unfortunately finds out later on that he really doesn't.
Which is, it's, rewatching it for the show, I felt like it was kind of fucked up how she tells him like, no, like I can't be who you want me to be for you.
Yeah.
He gets discharged. He goes to see her. She gives him this like super nice Rolex, engraved and everything specifically for him. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Not normal behavior for this type of scenario.
No, and even when he comes into the door, like, she kisses him, like, you know, that's her man.
Yeah, right. Even though she was just banging this other guy.
Yeah.
Moments before.
who turned out to be a cop.
Yeah. So awkward. He walks in on her.
Yeah.
With another dude, and then he has no choice but to sit out in the stairway.
He's just sitting on the stairs, and when the cop walks out, man, like, they don't even have eye contact. They don't look at one another. Like,
no,
he that guy seems totally unbothered that Eddie is sitting on the stairs right outside the door.
So he goes inside and he tries to remain calm, and he basically pitches her, Chantel, this idea of running away with him, and she's all, you know, like, I forget where.
She says Connecticut.
Yeah, Connecticut. Like, I can't go there. And he's like, it doesn't matter where. Like, I just want to be with you. Like, just come.
Yeah.
Come away with me. Doesn't matter. And then he starts singing Sea of Love to her. And she doesn't know how to internalize these feelings. And basically tells him to fuck off. Like, get the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really disappointed by this. I think you can tell.
Yeah. It's, and, you know, maybe he should have known better.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, like, the way that she acts with him it's more of a relationship than it is a business relationship.
Yeah, like if she does have some kind of feelings for him.
Yeah.
Personally. Which made it was kind of mind-boggling, like why did she get so offended? So he leaves, and then mirroring what he kind of does in the beginning of the film where he contemplates suicide, he starts to do that in his car. And that's when he sees these two kind of unsavory characters who are doing some kind of human trafficking, and he had a early run-in the beginning of his kind of story arc. He's watching these women kind of be wrangled into this van, and one of the dudes, somebody very familiar, whose name escapes me right now.
I'm gonna look him up. He's in Training Day.
He's in all the David Ayer stuff.
Yeah, we talked about him before. Whenever, where I'm like, oh yeah, he pops up in like all of the David Ayer movies.
In the beginning of the Eddie's arc, he's basically watching these guys kind of get these girls against their consent into this van and kind of shipping them away. And the gangster dude looks back up at Eddie.
Cleve Sloan? Oh, he's a former member of the Blood.
Oh.
And I think Fuqua met him doing Training Day and was kind of like, can you make sure nothing happens? Because they were shooting in some pretty dangerous spots. I think I remember that story. So he's kind of like the location manager on Training Day for that area where they're shooting those apartment complexes where
Denzel lives, right?
Where Denzel lives with Eva Mendes.
Where was I? All right, so cycling back to Eddie has just gotten into a fight with his escort. He's contemplating suicide, and then he sees the same tagged minivan with these unsavory guys once again wrangling these women for probably sex trafficking, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides to follow him. And this is where Eddie's arc starts to come to a close because he hasn't done anything really of merit.
He hasn't given a shit the entire movie.
He's just kind of by the numbers, waiting for, to collect his pension. Very kind of underwhelming life. And then this is his time where he's like, I know this information and I can put a stop to it.
Yes.
And it kind of what goes down to me, and I don't think it's by any means trying to rip it off or anything, but it kind of gives me Taxi Driver vibes a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
In the vein of Robert De Niro, where he's kind of like this character where you're not really sure how to feel about him, but in the end, he does do something or save Jodie Foster, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of plays out here. He follows these guys to their spot, figures out where they are, waits for one of them to go showering. He gets into this like little, it's, I don't know, it looks like some kind of like weird studio.
Yeah, and my question is this. You see the three leads cross paths with each other in that intersection.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see Hawk, park his car and get out and walk across the street, and he waits for the van and Eddie's car to go by, and then Cheeto gets out of his car, and the two of them pass each other, walking into their separate buildings. But Eddie still follows the van, and I don't know if this was just an editing or if it was deliberate, but after Ethan Hawke gets shot, you see it cuts to Gear, and he kind of looks up like he heard the shot.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, are they in the same building?
It seems like,
or is that just the way it was edited? And Eddie's really just kind of looking up because he's listening for to see if anyone is coming before he steps into this room.
If I didn't know better, I think that he heard the shot.
Okay,
is what I gathered from that. Is that
okay?
If they weren't in the same building, it was close enough for him to hear it. And then so he's outside and he goes into this small studio and attempts to help these women that are obviously in distress, handcuffed.
Well, the one he recognized because her picture is like a missing persons picture up on the same board where Logan Marshall Green's reward was posted. So he recognizes one of those girls. That's why he
went after.
That's why he follows these guys.
Mm-hmm. He unlocks them. They're handcuffed. The guy that goes to shower comes back, but Eddie is hiding behind the door. So then the guy comes in and is like, "Who fucking let you guys, or like let you guys free?" And then he pulls his weapon on the guy, tells him to get on the floor or on the bed, and of course the guy's going off on him, and he's like, "Don't let me see your face, you motherfucker," and just talking shit. And you could tell Eddie's like super uncomfortable, not used to this kind of interaction.
Yeah,
handcuffs him to the bedposts, so he can't really get up. And that's when our guy comes in, real relaxed with his bags of groceries or something, and he's all, "What the fuck is going on? Who's this guy?" And then
he's like, "Oh," he asked the dude if he's up to some freaky shit.
Yeah, he's like, "Are you doing some like freaky sex games or something?" but completely serious.
And he's pretty unperturbed by the guy pointing a gun at him.
Yeah. And he's like, wait a minute. Let me put my back down real quick. And he's like, "I know you. You're the guy walking around fucking so-and-so with your dick in your hand, right?"
Yeah.
And he's all, "Is that what you came here to get your dick sucked or something?" And he's all, "One of you come over here and suck my man's dick before I have to kill him or something." And then Eddie gets real upset over this. He's all, "Will you shut the fuck up and get on your belly?" And then the guy, on the that's handcuffed on the bed, it's like, "Dude, just take this guy out. He's not built for this." Like, they can tell
Yeah.
that he's in over his head.
Yeah, and he seems pretty scared.
And so the other one, he was like, "You see what I'm talking about? The devil makes it easy for me," or something. And he just tries to manhandle Eddie and gets shot in the chest.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he's upset because he didn't really think that Eddie would have the balls to do it. And they get into this real kind of wrestling match, essentially. And Eddie is able to grab a nearby zip tie and secure it around the dude's neck.
It's a brutal kill. That's like one of those heavy duty, super long zip ties.
Yeah.
That you only really use if you're trying to like tie somebody up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the dude effectively suffocates. And that kind of rounds out the story. We see the cops and everything, the ambulance around. I'm assuming they're there for multiple reasons because it's obviously in the same area that our other two stories take place.
Yeah.
And we see the women that were abducted in harm's way or out of harm's way. And I'm going to assume that they were able to arrest the other guy that was unharmed, right, on the bed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the film kind of ends on that high note of Eddie, or Richard Gere's character, kind of redeeming himself and doing something substantial before his retirement.
He was already retired. He was technically off the job, but he saw something happening, and he decided to do something to be a cop for a change, even though he technically wasn't anymore.
Do you think that had something to do with it? Is that he didn't have that status anymore, so then it kind of changed his perception?
Maybe. I think even him getting turned down by Chantel might have had something to do with it too. There was nothing good, nothing worth living for, and this was the good deed that he could do. I'm sure this came up in your research. There isn't a whole lot of research for this film, by the way. But this was not the ending that it had when it premiered at Sundance in 2009.
Do you know how the original cut ended?
Yes, I do. Do you?
I don't think that came up for me.
Ah, okay. The original cut ends with him finally committing suicide. the suicide, he starts off the movie doing that, and then he ends the movie with a suicide. But apparently, that when it premiered at Sundance, that's a really darker ending. And I don't think that went over very well. So between Sundance and when they released the film, which was 15 months later, by the time that the distribution and the production got sorted out, because it opens up in March of 2010, but it premieres in January of 2009. That's the Sundance Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
Between the time it premieres, Fuqua ditched the suicide, which I don't know. I would assume that ended with Gear leaving that crime scene, going back to his car and reloading his gun and, blowing his brains out. But Fuqua decides to end it on just that freeze frame of him walking away from the crime scene. And he says he did that because this ending kind of gives a little bit more hope. Like, all isn't lost. Like, he was contemplating suicide and, about to go through with it before he sees the girls in the van. And this is kind of like, he did this good thing. Maybe he does have something to live for. Maybe he does see this as his redemption arc.
The suicide right after this is kind of like feels heavy-handed.
If it feels heavy-handed, and also like, what a downer for your movie, because your other two or three main characters are also dead without anyone gaining anything. So I think this is a much better ending, simply because, like Fuqua says, there is a little bit more hope.
I would agree with that. I think this was a smart ending to an otherwise pretty grim story.
Like Clerks is a comedy, but it ends with Dante getting killed originally.
Yeah.
Like, what a fucking downer. Its opens on March 5th, 2010. Makes 13.3 in its opening weekend. Opens second place behind fucking Alice in Wonderland, which is that late period Tim Burton, like, really garbage ass movies. And then it ends with, 36 mil, you said?
I think it's like something like 36.4 million.
That's like worldwide. I think it makes just under 30 in the US. So it basically makes half of what it makes in the US on its opening weekend. And I don't know if it was just, it's a little dark, a little, bleak, that audiences just weren't into it.
I remember I've always been into kind of these like seedy kind of cop dramas.
I'm all about like the gritty stuff, man.
Yeah, right. It's very super entertaining, and I can't remember how I came upon these, but I got early screener tickets for Brooklyn's Finest, and this had to be like 2010 at some point. And I remember going to Horton Plaza, checking it out, and being blown away just by like I said, the ensemble cast, everything about it. I was like, fuck yeah, this movie rules. Like, when I walked away, I was totally satisfied. I think I saw it maybe 2 or 3 more times at the gas lamp.
At gas lamp, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I would describe it as fun, but it's just very engaging. And
It's a pretty intense film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just especially with Cheeto and Hawk's arcs. It's not a fun watch, but I think it's a great movie. And yeah, I'm with you. Like, I've always been into like the really kind of gritty dramas. But yeah, it didn't connect with the audiences. Didn't do the business it probably should have. I mean, shit. Maybe Training Day just did well based on the lead performance. But I'm like, Training Day isn't like a fun movie either.
No, I think it's just as bleak as Brooklyn's Finest. Now, it's not trying to do as much, so I think Training Day has a little bit more focus, and it has the bankable actor Denzel, of course, or Denzel, I guess is how you actually pronounce his name. I'm not sure if you know that or not. Yeah.
I didn't know that, but I mean, everyone for years says Denzel.
Well, the story behind that, or so Denzel says, is that he's named after his father, and that his mom would always call them, and call them like separately, and they would both be like, "Oh, what did you need or what did you want?" So to avoid the confusion, she went from Denzel and she started calling Denzel,
Okay.
and it just stuck, I guess, is the story, which is interesting in itself.
Yeah, that's like a fun little random piece of trivia.
Exactly. But yeah, going back to my thought, I think that just Training Day came out at the right time, and Washington was, I don't know, that movie is kind of an anomaly, you know?
Speaking of the time it came out, it comes out like right after 9/11.
Yeah.
Like that's not a fun period of time. But it's amazing that movie's that big of a hit because it's a pretty dark drama.
Mm-hmm.
Like a pretty dark crime drama. His performance definitely carries the movie, and as you know, we mentioned earlier, Ethan Hawke is just as fucking good in it.
Also, Washington, I feel like he rides the line of there is definitely like a it might be a dark sense of humor, but there's a sense of humor throughout all of his screen time, you know?
Yeah.
Where he makes, I think that's the difference, is that I think Training Day is a little bit more fun because of how Washington is so unhinged, but he's so comfortable and very just like that snappy dialogue, that very sure of himself, you know? Maybe that's the difference, but that's just my take.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. But I mean, this movie is in that same territory, but it doesn't have that electric performance. I get that. However, I think all three of these dudes are very good in this movie.
Absolutely. No argument there, man. I had a question for you. For Brooklyn's
Sure.
Finest, what would you rate this out of 5?
Out of 5? Probably like a solid 4.
Okay.
Maybe 4.5. I've always been like a big fan of it. I've always liked it. I've always said it's Fuqua's second best film. I know a lot of people haven't seen it, obviously, given the box office, but I think the last person I was telling about was Joel, because it was on Netflix or something. So I was like, dude, it's on Netflix. You should watch it. It's really fucking good. Well, I hope more people discover this movie. I'm hoping that, that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about it.
Yeah, I can appreciate that running theme with you, is that you're always, your motives behind your picks are to kind of revisit these films that have been critical or criminally underrated a lot of the time. And that's a lot of fun to talk about these.
Exactly. You and I do like one of two types of movies, and the one that we seem to do mostly is stuff that's really underrated, or that's like, not many people have seen. And then occasionally we'll get into like, some bigger films.
Yeah.
It's
either
that's like have like a place in pop culture or mean a lot to both you and I.
It's like either spectacle or nobody's heard of it.
Yeah. There is no middle ground. So, you want to hear some reviews?
Yeah, please.
I got a few reviews for you. It gets mixed reviews, obviously. Roger Ebert gives it 3 of 4 stars. Says the film has a basic strength in its performance and craft, but falls short of the high bar Fuqua has obviously set for himself with Training Day. But I mean, this is a good follow-up to Training Day. I mean, as you're looking at his filmography, those first 2 or 3 movies that he makes after Training Day, or the 2 or 3 that he has in between this and Training Day, are a big action film, like a war movie, basically. He does a fantasy movie with King Arthur, and then he does, kind of an action thriller with Shooter. And this kind of takes it back to that Training Day type of film, which, looking over that filmography, not obviously, I feel like I've said that too many times tonight, but he doesn't really come back to this type of movie again. He makes some other action movies. He makes the first Equalizer, I would say, isn't necessarily an action movie. It's kind of a thriller, an action thriller. But I mean, he has a boxing drama. He's got a Western. I have no idea what Infinite is.
That's like
I don't know
science
how
fiction.
to classify that. That's sci-fi, right?
Yeah, sci-fi.
I know that The Guilty's kind of like a real intimate character drama, and Emancipation, is a historical drama. So he hasn't really come back to this type of film, but I think it makes a good companion film to Training Day. Here's another one for you. Mick LaSalle, San Francisco Chronicle, praised the actors for bringing dimension to these stock characters, but said they're 3 cliches in search of a bloodbath.
Wrong.
I disagree with that one.
Yeah, that's very kind of vague too.
Yeah. And then A.O. Scott, New York Times, says, the sheer charismatic force of much of the acting keeps you in the movie, but Mr. Fuqua and Mr. Martin dig themselves into a pulpy predicament and then find themselves unable to do anything but shoot their way out. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that one, too. Yes, that's kind of the way the movie ends, but it's like, at least with Hawk and Cheadle, that makes sense. That's how those stories wrap up. Tango was in a little too deep, got a little too connected to everything, and basically becomes his character at the end. And then Sal was making every single bad decision that he could because he was so desperate, and that leads to his death as well. I mean, was there going to be a happy ending for Sal? No. You can't justify what he's been doing. But that's what I have to say about Brooklyn's Finest. I'm glad you were in agreement that this is the film that you and I could talk about. We could showcase on the February episode.
Yeah, man. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. This is one I've seen a lot since it's came out, and it was fun to kind of dive a little deeper in it and kind of examine it in a different way for the show. So I appreciate you giving me that opportunity. And this was a lot of fun.
Course. Of course. So sometimes what happens is I'll watch a movie and I'll be like, oh, this is a good movie that we should do on the show. And then just given scheduling and other movies that come up that we want to talk about, it keeps kind of getting bumped. So I'm glad that we did. It's a movie that I really think is completely underrated. All 3 of these character arcs, or the performances in them, are fantastic. I think Wesley Snipes is very good in his role. Again, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a lead role, because he's kind of the second build character in Cheadle's storyline, but he doesn't have any interaction with the other 2. But I think he's very good in it. And again, it's like one of those things where I wish Wesley Snipes was doing more work like this. And as we discussed, Richard Gere too. Cheadle is great and is I think is fantastic in all the Soderbergh movies. Obviously now he's in the Marvel universe. He's been in a handful of those movies as Rhodey, as War Machine. Love him in Boogie Nights. He's so good in that. Love him in Out of Sight. He's so much fucking fun in Out of Sight. And at least the first Ocean's movie, because the other 2 are... The 12 is kind of trash. But 13 I remember being pretty fun, but I've only seen it the one time. But none of them are nearly as good as the first one. It's so much fucking fun, and Cheadle is so funny in that. Yeah, I wish he had done more work with Paul Thomas Anderson too, because he's so fucking good in Boogie Nights. And Ethan Hawke has always been a fantastic actor that always does interesting work. So no complaints there. Richard Gere, do more movies like this, bro. Stop with the boring ass dramas, dude. Do something with a little bit of some edge to it, like this.
Also, check out, like I said in my write-up, check out Brooklyn's Finest on Cinemax right now. Have you seen his more recent work as far as movies?
No, I was looking at the list. The last one I saw was The Equalizer, the second Equalizer.
Okay, so you haven't seen You haven't seen The Guilty. You haven't seen Infinite. Or what the fuck is the one with Will Smith that just came out?
Emancipation. Yeah, the one came out like in December.
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen any of them. Infinite was a movie that I think was a casualty of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I think was supposed to come out, and then the pandemic hit, and it just went straight to streaming. I had totally forgotten about The Guilty. I didn't know about that until I looked him up on the IMDb to see what he had done recently, and I was like, oh yeah, because Gyllenhaal's in Southpaw, so he had worked with Gyllenhaal before. I'm looking over his IMDb here, and basically since 2014, he's made a movie every single year. So he's fucking busy, you know, on top of what the other stuff that we discussed, TV pilots and graphic novel and, you know, documentary work. So busy dude. But no, I haven't seen anything since the second Equalizer.
I haven't seen Infinite, but I saw The Guilty. I liked it. And I saw Emancipation, and I liked that as well.
Emancipation's good. But I've never seen Bait. Have you ever seen Bait?
Yeah, I remember my grandfather rented me that when it dropped on VHS. So I seen it all those years ago.
Pretty good or no?
I liked it. It's a solid kind of comedy thriller.
Okay. I remember the trailers for it. I mean, that movie's from 2000, you said? So,
yeah.
Jesus, that's 23 years old by now. But Training Day is awesome. I do like Tears of the Sun, even though it apparently Fuqua and Bruce Willis never got along.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but that's kind of the MO with Bruce Willis for a lot of movies. But King Arthur's a bad movie.
And that's probably one of Fuqua's most financially successful films. It made over 200 million, I think, at the box.
I remember when it came out, it was a hit, but I wasn't wild about it at all. Shooter's pretty good.
Yes.
I think that's streaming now because I've seen that on a few times. Plus, I'm always in for a movie where Danny Glover's a bad guy,
mm-hmm.
and I love him in that. And Ned Beatty too is a pretty good bad guy in that. Olympus Has Fallen. Never seen it. Won't watch a Gerard Butler movie.
Another big hit, big pop.
A huge hit, a huge enough hit that they made 2 fucking more movies. Which apparently at least one of them was another big hit. And then The Equalizer, which you and I both really, really love. Southpaw, which I'm very meh on. I think Gyllenhaal's great, and I think it's pretty good, but then Creed comes out like a little bit later and is so much better. You know, no offense to Gyllenhaal, who again I said is great in that movie. But as far as the boxing goes in it, like Creed like wipes the floor with it. I think Creed comes out like 4 or 5, 6 months later. One thing I do want to mention before we get off of this film is the cross-cutting between the stories. That scene where Cheadle's on the roof, Gears with the rookie partner dealing with the altercation in the bodega, and Hawk is raiding that house where he's trying to get the money off the table.
Yeah.
The cross-cutting in between those 3 sequences in that middle chunk of the movie is really intense and captivating. And it kind of does it again towards the end, but not nearly as well as it does in that middle section. That was something that really stood out to me when I was watching it on the 2 or 3 rewatches I just gave it these last few days for the show. I was like, oh, like the editing in this sequence is really great, the way it's cutting between those 3 story arcs. It's kind of like where each character is reaching like their breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
It's very good, so I want to shout out that sequence.
Let's do a little teaser for your end of the month next month, which is March.
Again, I told you we were starting the movie or the year off with some really underrated films. We're going to jump into another super underrated movie. Super underrated Western, a pretty modern or very recent Western that just had absolutely no fanfare. I don't think anyone besides you and me and Joel have seen this film. All right, well, my dad, because that's one of the last movies I got a chance to take him to, was this one. So, a very, very underseen recent Western that I think is so underrated that, again, like this movie, has 3 very incredible lead performances that just were completely ignored. And I wish that this movie was more well known. I can't wait to talk about it. I'm going to guess that there's going to be 0 research for us to do. So hopefully we can have a good conversation about the film without having a whole lot of facts and stories and production notes to back it up. So I'm excited to talk about that. I know that this is a movie that you really love.
I do.
I even remember like closing out one of our episodes years ago when this movie was coming out by you saying, "Oh, hey, this movie opens up this weekend. Go see it." And we're like, "Oh yeah, let's go watch that movie," and like no one saw it.
Which is, like you said, it's a shame. It's a beautifully crafted film, and I can't wait to talk about it on the show and hopefully get some traction for it or something.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know if this movie is streaming. Another director who just recently had a movie that came out.
Also, I'll take this opportunity to talk about. So next month is March, and that means that Scream 6 is dropping. So I had a little idea to kind of revisit the whole basis of why this podcast was started, and that was because of the first initial Scream trilogy. So we're going to cover a Scream film for each week of the month of March in anticipation for the new film. Obviously, there are 5 films in the franchise, so we're going to do 4 and 5 together, so that way, everything works out. But I'm pretty excited to kind of revisit these films and essentially redo some of our very first episodes for the show.
Yeah, those first episodes, it wasn't even James yet. It was you and Dennis.
Yeah, right.
Are you going to get Dennis to come back?
That would be epic, but I really doubt he would do it. That would be so meta, and it would make sense because it's Scream just to have Dennis on again. But I would seriously doubt that he would agree to that. But nonetheless, I'm very excited to talk about all these films. And
who are you going to have on for the dumpster fire? That's number 3.
I hope to have both James and Ryan. But as you know, I'm not a fan of 3, 2, so there will be, again, a lot of shit talking. I think I did my fair share of shit talking on that original episode for Scream 3. So it'll be fun to, well, as fun as that movie can be, I guess, rewatching it, but it'll be fun to kind of take a massive dump on it again.
Yes.
And just be like, well, just go to 4. Just it's 1, 2, 4.
You can completely skip over the third one.
I even said that to Ryan. I was like, why don't we just not acknowledge 3? And he was all, man, we can't do that. We got to talk about it.
Hey, even a really bad movie is very interesting to talk about. Because like you said, it's either talking shit or why the movie went so bad. Maybe it had all kinds of production issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, this one did. Well, that's awesome, dude. That's a good plan for the month of March.
Yeah, we're gonna have hopefully like a little giveaway, Scream giveaway for our listeners. So I'm excited to do that. For our listeners out there, we are Drop the Mic. We operate out of San Diego, California, and we are available on all the major podcast platforms, including Luminary, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Sods, what have you, YouTube. If it plays a podcast, we're on it, so check us out. Give us a 5-star rating, a little kind review if you like what we're putting out there. It It helps us a lot. So thank you to everybody that pays attention and listens to these episodes, because we have a lot of fun with them. And again, thank you, Chris, for making time for the show, for me, and doing this every month is a blast, and I can't wait to continue on down the road.
Absolutely. Again, as always, thank you for having me. Thank you for accommodating my sometimes busy schedule. Thank you for making the accommodation this time when we were supposed to have weather. And we actually did get weather by about the time you and I were working, or were starting the show tonight. It was raining over here, so I don't feel as bad.
You're doing just fine, bro. Don't worry.
Well, I like doing them in person, and barring any other weather-related incidents, when we go to record for March, we'll do that one face-to-face again.
Hell yeah, I can't wait, man.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for letting me talk about this underrated film.
No problem. So until next time, this is Wesley Swanson and Chris Pollock signing off, saying good fight and good night.
Good night.
This is Admiral.